The world never gave him a map, just walls, just cells, just traps. But from every locked door, every broken floor, a new name was born. This is his story. All of them. He was Stephen first, Stephen, the boy with fire in his eyes and ink on his fingers before most children had learned to sit still. He worked since school age, never once asking for a hand he hadn't earned. His teachers called him gifted, his grades hung on the walls like trophies, he had a mind like a well-oiled machine, and a future so clearly drawn in his imagination that he could close his eyes and walk through every room of it, the office, the degree, the life built on his own terms, by his own hands. He was the grade A student in a school that didn't expect grade A students from where he came from. He was the bright flame in a room the world had long decided should remain dark. But the system, that enormous, indifferent, grinding thing, had looked at a boy from the wrong side of town and seen not a future, but a problem to be managed. It smiled to his face while it quietly built the cage. It praised him in the classroom while it measured him for chains. Stephen was the spark, and they came to kill the flame. From the classroom to the courtroom, it happened with a speed that still doesn't make sense to the man he would become. From the textbook to the cell, from the gold star on the page to the steel door swinging shut behind him. They took a grade A student and they dragged him straight to hell. Not because of anything he had done, but because of who they needed him to be. Part 2. Slater. The party, the pills, the fall. When a person cannot breathe inside their own name, they find another one. Slater arrived when Stephen could no longer carry the weight of what had been done to him. When the system had cracked the boy wide open and left the pieces on the floor, Slater stepped in and took the keys. Slater was survival dressed up as recklessness. He was the nightclub lights when the court lights had been too bright, too cruel, too honest. He was the smoke in the room when the truth had become unlivable. The party every night. Class A substances moving through his veins like a second bloodstream, numbing the places that pain had burned raw. The corners and the streets became his new classroom, the hustle, his new curriculum. He dealt to survive it, not out of greed, not out of ambition, but out of a desperation so deep and so quiet that it didn't even have a name. Every sale was a heartbeat. Every loss was another small defeat in a life that had already seen too many large ones. Slater wore the mask so Stephen didn't have to cry. 2 souls in one body, one born to fly, one born to keep the other alive long enough to find out how. The world saw a young man falling through the cracks. What they couldn't see was that the young man falling had never been given a floor to land on. From the school gates to the trap house. From the A grades to the rap and the corner and the cold. From the boy with all the answers to the man that the answers had abandoned. Slater was not the villain of this story. He was the coping mechanism. He was what happens when a brilliant mind is given no legitimate place to shine. Part 3. Slim. The sectioned. The silenced. The scribe. Then they sectioned him. He became Slim in a white room with bars on the window and a concrete floor so cold it seeped through everything. Through the thin mattress, through the standard issue clothes, through to the marrow of a person who had already lost so much. They called it care. They called it treatment. But behind the locked doors of that adolescent unit, what happened to him was neither care nor treatment. It was abuse wrapped in clinical language, cruelty dressed in protocol, wrongfully imprisoned, framed for crimes he had never committed. The system that had built the cage around Stephen had now placed Slim inside it and thrown away the key. Isolated from his family, no calls, no visits, no familiar face in the doorway. Isolated from his friends, as if those connections were a privilege he had forfeited by existing. The only sound was the echo of his own footsteps on institutional halls, walking the same circuit day after day as if movement itself might eventually lead somewhere. But in that darkness, something extraordinary happened. Slim picked up a pen. Maybe it was the only thing left. Maybe when everything has been taken, your name, your freedom, your people, your future, the pen becomes the last sovereign territory. The page asks nothing of you. The page does not judge or sentence or section or frame. The page simply receives what you give it. And what Slim gave it was 35 years worth of war pressed into verse, bar by bar, line by line, in blood and breath, and the kind of honesty that only survives in the dark. He wrote the bars that would one day free him. Not immediately and not in the way freedom comes in films, with doors opening and light flooding in. But in the way real freedom comes, slowly and painfully, through the accumulation of words that give shape to suffering, and in doing so, begin to dissolve its power. They took his freedom. They took his name. They took everything he had. But they could not take the lyrics written blood deep on that pad in that white room, with the barred window and the cold concrete floor. That was Slim's. That would always be Slim's. 35 years of war inside one mind. Addiction as the enemy, trauma close behind it like a shadow that knows your name. Mental health misunderstood by everyone who should have known better. Substance misuse ignored by systems designed to punish rather than heal. But even then, even through all of that, every structured day program was a step. Every small, institutional, underfunded, overcrowded step was still a step towards something he couldn't yet name but could feel. The way you can feel sunlight through a window even when you can't see the sky. Part 4, The Climb. Recovery, education, redemption. He walked into a community center for the first time on a Tuesday. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lights, the smell of bad coffee, and real effort. The kind of room where nobody has to explain why they're there, because everyone in the room already knows. Daily meetings, 12 steps on a broken floor, taken one at a time, sometimes the same step twice, sometimes sliding backwards before going forward again. But always, always moving. Probation office Tuesdays, mental health mentor on the days the weight became too much to carry alone. A substance misuse worker who sat across a desk that had seen 1,000 stories and said, without sentimentality or pity, with something more useful than either. You've got more in you than anything you've ever read. He believed it. Not all at once, not without argument, without the dark nights of doubt that come to everyone who has survived what he had survived, but the belief took root because it had to. Because the alternative was to let the system have the final word, and he had already decided, in that white room, with that pen, on that cold floor, that the system would not have the final word. College on the weekdays, night class after the sun went down, an IT course in the mornings, fingers learning a different kind of keyboard from the one that had saved him in the cell. Extra lessons on Thursdays, court again on Fridays, because the system doesn't release you cleanly, doesn't hand you your life back with an apology and a clear path forward. It makes you return again and again to prove that you are worthy of the freedom that was always yours. But every single setback became the next right pathway. Every obstacle turned, in his hands, into a stepping stone. From the asylum to the lecture hall, from the prison to the page. Every bar he had ever written in chains became his currency, his credential, his proof of survival. University came next. Steve was coming back, not the boy who had been taken, but a man who carried that boy's grades and Slim's scars and Slater's hunger and the pen that had never stopped writing. 3 men in one body, finally learning how to stand together. The system had tried to bury them. Instead, it had compacted them into something harder, something that would not be moved again. Part 5, Fatty Smalls, the lyricist, is born, late at night in a bedroom that was finally, unmistakably his own, with headphones around his neck and a microphone that cost more than a week's wages and was worth every penny. Fatty Smalls was born. Not created, born, the way all real things are born, from pressure and time and the refusal to remain unspoken. Fatty Smalls emerged when the pen met the beat for the first time and something clicked into place that had always been out of alignment. When every verse he had ever written in darkness found its rhythm, its pulse, its reason to exist beyond the page. The lyricist rose from the rubble and the rain. From wrongful incarceration and a lifetime of pain turned into something the world could hear, could feel, could reckon with. He wrote to heal the wounds that no doctor had ever seen, the ones that don't show on scans and can't be measured in blood work. He wrote for every brother still caged behind a door, every man sitting in a cell with a mind that deserved a stage, every boy the system had decided was a problem before he was old enough to prove otherwise. Fatty Smalls didn't rap for fame. He rapped so truth could breathe. Every bar was a testimony. Every hook was a reason to believe. Not in the system, not in the institutions that had failed him at every turn, but in the unbreakable, unreasonable, magnificent human capacity to survive and then, against all odds, to create. From the bars behind the window to the bars inside the microphone. From the darkness of the system to the studio at midnight, where the light was always on because the work was never finished and the work would never be finished as long as there were still people whose stories had never been told. Part 6, Top Cat, the producer, the architect, the king. 5 years in the factory, 5 years of alarm clocks and shift patterns and a body doing repetitive work while a mind planned something enormous. Every hour on that factory floor was an investment. Every sacrifice, every night not spent in the studio, every morning not spent behind the boards, was a brick in the foundation of something that nobody else could see yet but him. He laid the first brick of the studio dream with hands that had worked for 5 years to afford it. He built it the way he had survived everything else, deliberately, patiently, without asking anyone's permission or waiting for anyone's validation. Every person who had ever counted him out, every system that had written him off, every door that had been slammed in his face, and none of them were in the room when he laid that first brick, none of them would be in the room when it was finished. The Top Cat AK, the producer on the boards, the architect of sound, the man who took trauma and turned it into frequencies that moved people in ways they couldn't always explain. Pain into chords, chaos into composition, the thing that had been done to him becoming the thing he did to the world, not in anger, not in retribution, but in art, in the purest, most uncompromising, most necessary form of art. The goal was clear, and he had never lost sight of it. Not in the White Room, not in the cell, not on the factory floor, household name, radio, socials, streams. A massive following built on music that told the truth, a steady income built on the foundation of 5 years of sacrifice and 35 years of survival. Bigger than it seemed because it was never just about the music, it was about what the music proved. That you cannot bury a person whose story is worth telling. That the system, for all its walls and doors and clinical language and institutional silence, cannot stop a man from becoming what he was always meant to be. From the school desk to the mixing desk. From the cell to the stage. Steven, Slater, Slim, Fatty Smalls, all of them authors of the same page, all of them chapters in the same extraordinary, impossible, true story. The final chapter, One Man. There is a studio now, and in the window of that studio, when the light hits just right, you can see all of them reflected. Steven, with his grades and his hunger and the future that was stolen and then rebuilt. Slater, with his survival instincts and his hunger and the hard-won knowledge of what it costs to keep a broken person alive long enough to heal. Slim, with his pen and his bars and the 35 years of war written in every line of his face and every line of his verse. Fatty Smalls, with his microphone and his testimony and his unshakable belief that truth, given a beat, can change the world. And Top Cat, the one who holds all of them, the one who built the room, the one who finally gave them all a place to stand together. They said he was too broken, too damaged, too far gone. They said it in courtrooms and clinical assessments and probation meetings and the quiet, devastating arithmetic of a society that counts some people as losses before they've even begun. But every version of him that they tried to bury kept living on, stubbornly, furiously, beautifully, alive. Steven kept the grades alive inside the memory, the proof that the mind they tried to cage was always exceptional. Slater taught him hunger when he had no dignity left, the animal knowledge of how to survive on nothing but will. Slim wrote every lyric in the darkest of the nights, turning the worst of what had been done to him into the best of what he had to give. Fatty Smalls gave voice to all of it and brought it to the light, made it audible, made it undeniable, made it art. And Top Cat took the whole of it, the chaos and the fire, the grief and the grace, the wrongful imprisonment and the rightful redemption, and built a studio, a legacy, a kingdom from the wire. 15 years of celibacy, 35 of war, a life that most people, hearing it summarized in a sentence, would call tragedy. But he is not broken. He is the blueprint of what human beings can be when they refuse, against every instruction and every institution, to be anything less than what they are. And somewhere on a track not yet released, not yet heard by the world that is coming to hear it, there is a voice. Kate, his one and only, the woman whose voice on the record is the sound of everything he has ever hoped for finding its way home. She rapped his resurrection. She never once looked back. Neither will he. Written by Top Cat AK Slim, Fatty Smalls, Steven, Slater, in collaboration with Super Cool A,